Welcome back to the Healing Trauma video series. This is the second video of that series where we are going to talk about common adaptations to trauma. In the last video, we introduced trauma. We defined it and explained what it is. Basically, if you haven't seen it, which I'll link it in the show notes, the gist of it is things happen, and that's not the trauma. The trauma is how we respond to it. So when we don't have the capacity to navigate the painful, hurtful thing in life, we adapt to it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. One of the most common adaptations to trauma is that we disconnect. We have this wonderful built-in defense mechanism. Whenever life gets too stressful, too difficult, and we can't make that difficult pain, stress stop, and we can't get away from it, as is the case for most of us when we're children, for instance, is this defense mechanism kicks in and we disconnect from the present moment. One of the most common ways that we do that is we go away mentally. It makes perfect sense. You can't make it stop. You can't go away physically. You go away mentally. So this disconnect here is the hallmark. It is the fingerprint of trauma. One of the ways that we continue this disconnect is by stuffing down, suppressing, bottling up, or pushing away who we truly are. Now, one of the first things that we tend to disconnect from are our emotions. See, when we're navigating the stress, the emotions are the unbearable thing. And if we're going through an abusive relationship or an abusive household, as was the example in the first video, what happens when you express your emotions? Oftentimes, it makes things more dangerous, more difficult. Even further, what happens when your emotions threaten your connections? We learn very early the emotions have to go. So this is one of the first things that we'll start to suppress, but not just the emotions, not just the anger, the sadness, the fear, but also our boundaries, our expression of those emotions. See, those emotions, they're there for a reason. They're signals. They help us communicate things. Anger is there, for instance, when there's a threat, when we're in danger, when we're being treated poorly. The anger comes up as a boundary, but we learn to suppress that. So we suppress our emotions, we suppress our expression, and we suppress our boundaries. All of these get buried, disconnected, and then we put a mask on of who we think can navigate this circumstance. We learn this early when we go through the trauma, but it becomes a pattern that we continue through life if that initial trauma hasn't been addressed. Another very common behavior as an adaptation to trauma is that we become pleasers. We try to take care of everybody's needs, oftentimes with great resentment and at the expense or the sacrifice of ourselves. And this makes perfect sense. If you're growing up in an abusive environment, you have to be aware of other people's emotions. And it makes sense that we would try to take care of everybody, that we would keep everybody happy and pleased. If we do that, then we become safe. If we can keep everybody happy, then we can maintain our attachments. But this doesn't happen just in abusive households. I have worked with numerous people who had a sick parent, a dying parent, or very stressed parents, parents who cared tremendously about their kid, and the kids picked up on that, and so they did not want to add to that stress. They didn't want to be a burden, so they learned to suppress all of their emotions, all of their needs, and to take care of their parents or their caregivers in that sense. And so when we start taking care of other people's emotional needs before our own, there's usually a belief about ourselves, which I will talk about in just a minute, but it looks something like, I'm not worthy, I'm not deserving, I'm not good enough. And so later in life, we become caregivers. This is a fantastic profession whenever you feel like you're not good enough. You can go become a doctor and you will always be good enough. People are going to need you. People are going to value and respect you. You can be a nurse. You can be a therapist. All of these fields right here provide tremendous external validation. So when we are carrying that pain from the initial trauma and it takes the form of, I'm not good enough, because how do you make sense of the fact that you grew up in an abusive family or your needs were not met? Well, the only way that we can really make sense of it is that I wasn't deserving of getting it. This is how we think when we're kids. This is the worldview we develop. And so later in life, when we have this same sense of unworthiness, then we go and become worthy. And our society rewards it and cherishes it. And so we can sacrifice our relationships with our kids later on in life to go be good enough and be valuable by accumulating things like wealth, status, power. And this is another adaptation to the trauma, which is if I grew up in an environment that was dangerous and threatening, rather than just becoming a pleaser, rather than just suppressing myself, what I can do is I can become grandiose and big and aggressive and assertive. And I can go out there and enact control over all those other people and all those other structures because I didn't have any control when I needed it. And if I have enough of this pain, and if I try hard enough to be good enough, well, then I can rise to the highest positions of power in our society. I can become a president or a CEO or a high-level executive where I can enact all of that pain that I once had, that I still carry around, onto other people. All of this is trying to fulfill and soothe the initial pain of that trauma that I have not addressed. And this is the foundation of addictions. And we can be addicted to many things. It's not just about substances. We can be addicted to work. We can be addicted to external validation from other people. We can be addicted to checking out and scrolling on the phone, so on and so forth. But this, not knowing what to do with this pain and then acting it out through the adaptation that we had originally to that pain, this is the foundation of addictions. And so if we want to address those, we have to look at the initial pain. A major part of this initial pain, as I mentioned a moment ago, are the beliefs that we form from that pain. I started on it just a moment ago, but let's touch it again. When you go through the trauma, which almost always starts early in life, how do you make sense of that situation? If your parents are unavailable, or they're stressed, or they're checked out, or further, if they're causing you stress and they're causing you danger, how do we make sense of that as children? There's two ways, really. We could say, well, my parents are just not up to the job. They're not qualified, they're not capable, they're not willing, they're not ready to do this. In other words, I am screwed. But children rarely come to that idea. I came to it very early in my life, and even once I knew it, I still couldn't accept it because it meant I was screwed. There was no way through this. So that opens up another alternative, which is, well, my parents, they got relationships, they have connections, they have people that they value. My parents valued other people, other children, for instance. And we look at that and say, well, clearly these needs that I have can be met. So if I could just be good enough, then I will get them. In other words, the belief is I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not deserving. So this belief is an adaptation to the pain, and it helps us tremendously in the short term. Because if I can be good enough, then I can be safe. Then I can get my needs met. Then I can have the connections. And we can see here that this ties into the I'm responsible for other people's emotions belief. And also another one, which comes around very commonly, which is the belief that I have to be strong, independent, and do everything on my own because those people are dangerous and unreliable at the least. Nobody wants to become strong, independent, and do everything on their own, especially at an early age. This belief is an adaptation to trauma. Ideally, we would become strong, independent, and do things on our own, coming out of the security and the safety of dependence, having secure, safe attachments that are always there, always available, and always protective. And we can step out of those at our own comfort and explore the world. And then when we encounter the dangerous things, we come back. That's the ideal. But if we didn't have that, well, we have to cultivate I have to be strong and I got to do everything on my own and be independent. This is another adaptation to trauma. It helps us in the short term, but is the source of great pain if it is not addressed. These beliefs of unworthiness, when we can really start to see them in ourselves, we can see that wow, they are actually built into almost every aspect of our entire social structure. Multiple sectors of the economy are based on the belief that you are not good enough. So you have to sell your life to go work for this company. And if you can be there long enough and sacrifice yourself enough, you can climb to the positions of power where you can be valued. Or you're not good enough unless you buy our product. Then people will like you. If you look around, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And maybe you already know exactly what I'm talking about. The more that we can see these beliefs in ourselves, the more we can navigate all of these sectors in our world that are based on keeping us feeling unworthy and undeserving. The goal is that we want to learn to become the person that we needed so we can learn to treat ourselves with value, with respect. We can cherish and prioritize our own health. The goal by identifying these dynamics is not to beat ourselves up and say, oh, I have all these terrible patterns and they cause me to suffer, or even further to say, oh my gosh, I have all these terrible patterns and they have flowed onto me, onto my children, or onto the people who are closest to me. That's not the goal here. What we want to do is start to see these so we can take responsibility for them, meaning that we can respond to them differently. We have the ability to respond. We can take accountability for them. The more that we can do this, the more we can recognize and identify them in our life and then accept them and work with them, the more we can choose to do things differently. So if this video was valuable to you, and I hope it was helpful, please stay tuned for the next section, because in the next video, we're going to talk about the common ways that we become disconnected. You won't want to miss this because we can see it everywhere in our world around us, and it is up to us as individuals to start to heal these disconnects. Enjoy.